back to Letter with ABC, a series on hand lettering. Today's episode is going to be focused on the second font style, which is Sans Serif. Keep watching to learn more about it.
A modern approach to serifs, sans serif fonts omit serifs. Sans means without in French. Also referred to as a Gothic typeface, sans serifs provide a modern and youthful look to your typography. This font style is widely used for headlines, road signs, and important statements due to its naturally block and bold type characteristic. So to start, as you can see here, I am doing some warm-ups on Sans Serif, and these are some of the fonts that I've been personally developing and using for the past years that I've been doing lettering. I first encountered Sans Serif and thought it was kind of a boring font, but maybe it's just me because it reminds me so much of our handwriting because we usually write in block letters, right? But eventually, as I dug deep into learning typography and learning more about fonts and really developing my own letter forms, I did realize that this font style is actually very versatile and you can play around with so many different patterns, ideas, and ways that you can further enhance the letter form. So apart from doing the usual, which is block lettering for sans serif in general, I always suggest going further and beyond, like creating shapes like this or diving into a lot of different aspects that sort of reflect what sans serif is about. If you're familiar with the Bauhaus movement, sans serif is actually a very prominent font style during that time because they developed a lot of fonts that sort of resemble geometric shapes, and that actually led to a lot of transitions that sort of modernized how sans serif was. Because when this was created, I believe during that time, they were all, I probably got sick of why don't we just remove the serifs and make something new? It's a totally new font. But what I like about this font is it was actually very interesting how they would create sans serif fonts, usually for newspaper headlines or posters and signages, and they complement well with serif per se. So as I mentioned in the previous video about serifs are usually used for body text, but sans serifs are usually used for headlines. But in the case of web design, most people prefer sans serif as reading text, like body text. So it really depends. I personally like using more serifs, but at the same time, sans serifs also help in terms of legibility because some sans serifs are light in nature or thinner. So I'm just going and trying my hand at this. If you've noticed, I really have a penchant for adding a lot of embellishments, and I am using this font where I sort of collaborate with the swirls and also the block letters. So also this color scheme was very much accidental, which I ended up liking because I have some tones of copper and also some pinks and also this bluish gray tone, and also paired with the light faded blue color of the mild liner brush that I'm using. The rest are a hodgepodge of some of the materials I use here. So yeah, I would say in terms of sans serif, you can really experiment with not just the block font, but adding patterns inside the letter form. Since especially when you're using block, it's nice to add a lot of patterns and also to add stuff outside of the letter form. They are technically embellishments, but I still consider them part of the letter. And for me, this is such a great way to sort of build up your creativity. And since you're watching this demo video, I would suggest also trying out different styles. You can copy this directly, but you can also come up with different changes, maybe making some letters thinner, some thicker. You'd see how these different effects really change the dynamic and characteristic of each letter form. And with that, you get a wide variety of options that you can try eventually. I mean, what's nice about lettering in general for me is from fonts, we get to derive a lot of different ideas based on our own design principles and also how we see things and how we can translate it to this font style and this form. And through that, you'll be able to stimulate more of your creativity and be able to come up with new ideas and basically play around. And what I like about this, it's actually easier because then you get a concrete idea of you've already developed 26 font styles after making this montage of A to Z in your own style or just by copying this. So yeah, this is the final output for the sans serif one. So now let's move on to the technical side of this series. So we're going to get the sans serif page from the Letter with ABC workbook, and we're going to start tracing. So the reason why I always ask you guys to do this is just so you know the basic concept of each font style, but honestly this won't be that relevant if we start doing our own letters, but it's always also nice to have a foundation of how the shapes are formed and how these fonts are generally formed. So the first one I'm tracing over here is called the grotesque. So the grotesque fonts are the first set of sans serif fonts that were created. So I would assume these were the ones that were initially used to that were removed off of the serifs. The serifs were removed for this letter form, and these came out in the 19th century. So many of these typefaces only also had capitals or don't really have a lot of variations because it came from serifs, and at that time they weren't really more modernized with the whole concept. And some of the common grotesque sans serif fonts that you'd still see on your desktop or your computer or font book would be News Gothic. This one that I'm using is called Franklin Gothic. It's also quite popular, and you will see that it's quite condensed compared to the normal measurements and thickness, so I think that also poses a big difference. So the next sans serif font style is called the geometric font style, which is composed of very thick strokes, or in my case, I would consider them more of as shapes. So this font style is actually influenced by the Bauhaus designers in the early 20th century. If you're not familiar with the Bauhaus movement, I suggest doing a quick Google and learning more about this movement, which influenced modern design, I would say. It was a school actually in the 1920s, so it was focused on a lot of design development in general. So if you're wondering, this font is actually Futura, which is a font that Wes Anderson uses a lot, and it's very geometric in nature. That's why I chose to illustrate this for this exercise. Last but not least, we are moving to the last sans serif font style, which is called the neo-grotesque. So these types of fonts are already the ones you see in your computer in recent development. So one of the most popular ones would be Helvetica and Arial, both of which I don't know if they're cousins or rivals, but anyway, they have their own quirks. So these types of fonts are also called transitionals or realists because they include many of the most commonly used fonts, sans serif fonts that are used today. These are also based on grotesques and more of like modernizing it and taking it into a new level with proper construction and proper design. So as you can see, type in general is not similar to lettering in such a way that when you letter stuff, it's really based on drawing and really creating a lot of dynamic out of it. But in terms of typography, you really have to focus on the legibility, readability, and the quality of each font. This is something I realized when I would always pick my specific font aesthetic that I'm looking for, especially when I'm redesigning my website or picking out fonts for a blog post or for a graphic design piece or layout work, because I feel like the whole concept of picking out fonts and also figuring out how your words will properly look on screen or on paper or in print really makes a big difference, and that's something that we all have to take note of. Also, if you compare it to the grotesque on top, it's just a bit thicker, but more or less they have the same qualities, and I would say the whole idea is just really like having like a level up or like a better way of like restructuring what grotesque was all about. I think grotesque was really more of preserving the old style that they wanted to sort of derive from serif. And we are done.
Thanks for watching this video. video and make sure to download the Letter with ABC workbook to guide you on your hand lettering journey throughout the episodes. If you want to learn more about lettering, I actually wrote and illustrate a lot of books about it, so I will share it here. So first off, you have the ABCs of hand lettering. This is the basic guide you need to get started into hand lettering. You also have the lettering workbook, which is available in the Philippines, and I also have some available in the US. I will link it down below also for your reference. This is a self-published workbook. Apart from this, I also have this book called Hand Lettering A to Z, which is how you can create different font styles and different techniques with your hand lettering. This has been translated into 9 languages and is available worldwide, as well as the Hand Lettering A to Z workbook, which is an accompaniment to this book, and it's great to work with together. Lastly, if you'd like to get into more of hand lettering and calligraphy, I suggest picking up a copy of the complete photo guide to hand lettering calligraphy, also available worldwide, mostly in Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Book Depository, and all the respective links. I will make sure to put them down below for your reference. See you guys on the next video. Bye!